Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
The disappearance of Marsha Brantley is a haunting and complex case that has left her family, friends, and the community of Cleveland, Tennessee, searching for answers for over a decade. Marsha, a 50-year-old writer, animal lover, and devoted wife, vanished without a trace in June 2009. Her case is riddled with unanswered questions, suspicious behavior, and a lack of concrete evidence, making it one of the most perplexing missing persons cases in recent memory. This is the story of Marsha Brantley's disappearance, the investigation that followed, and the ongoing quest for justice. Marsha Brantley was a well-known and beloved figure in Cleveland, Tennessee, a small city known for its tight-knit community and rich history. She lived in the Benwood subdivision, in a house her parents had built for her. Marsha was an only child, and after her parents passed away within a month of each other in late 2000, she inherited a significant estate. This inheritance allowed her to support her husband, Donnie Brantley, in his handyman business and pursue her passion for writing. Marsha was a talented writer who had formed a local writers group called the Thunder Rock Writers. She was working on young adult novels and had even won awards for her work. Her friends described her as kind, intelligent, and deeply devoted to her husband and her 3 dogs, whom she treated like children. Marsha's life seemed idyllic on the surface, but beneath the facade, there were signs of trouble. Marsha was last seen in late May or early June 2009. Her sudden disappearance was first noticed by her hairdresser, Kelly DeLude, who had been cutting Marsha's hair for nearly a decade. Marsha was meticulous about her appointments, so when she missed her scheduled haircut in June, Kelly grew concerned. She reached out to Marsha's neighbor, who reported that Marsha's dogs had been barking incessantly, her flowers were dead, and her car was still at the house. This was highly unusual for Marsha, who was known for her routine and love for her pets. Kelly's concern deepened when she called Marsha's husband, Donnie Brantley, and discovered that his business phone had been disconnected. When Kelly finally reached Donnie, he claimed that Marsha had left him and gone out west. This explanation struck Kelly as odd, given Marsha's deep attachment to her home, her dogs, and her husband. Kelly's instincts told her something was terribly wrong, and she reported Marsha as a missing person to the Cleveland Police Department in November 2009. From the beginning, Donnie Brantley's behavior raised red flags. He never reported Marsha missing and offered conflicting stories about her whereabouts. At various times, he claimed she had gone to Townsend, Tennessee, to Florida, or out west to work as a missionary. Investigators found these stories inconsistent and suspicious, especially since Marsha had left behind nearly all her belongings, including her car, clothes, and important documents. Authorities also discovered that Donnie had sold several of Marsha's possessions, including jewelry and a laptop, shortly after her disappearance. He had also made a series of suspicious purchases around the time she vanished, including a torch kit, duct tape, and plastic sheeting, items that could be used to dispose of a body. Additionally, phone records revealed that Donnie had called a Chattanooga singles hotline and an ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Richardson, within days of Marsha's disappearance. Donnie even sent Stephanie a greeting card with a message, "Things are better for me now," which prosecutors later cited as evidence of his motive. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and local authorities launched an extensive investigation into Marsha's disappearance. They searched her home, interviewed friends and family, and analyzed financial records. They discovered that Donnie's handyman business was failing and that Marsha's inheritance was being drained to keep it afloat. This financial strain, combined with Donnie's suspicious behavior, led investigators to believe that Marsha's disappearance was not voluntary. In 2011, The case was taken over by investigators Zach Pike and David Shoemaker of the Bradley County Sheriff's Office. They focused on building a circumstantial case against Donnie, as there was no body, no crime scene, and no direct evidence of foul play. Key pieces of evidence included Marcia's cell phone, which had never left the area and was used by Donnie after her disappearance, and the fact that Donnie failed a polygraph test in 2010. In August 2013, Donnie Brantley was arrested and charged with Marcia's murder. However, the case was dropped in 2014 due to insufficient evidence. The charges were reinstated in December 2016, but the case was dismissed again in February 2018, just days before the trial was set to begin. Prosecutors feared that the judge would acquit Donnie due to the lack of direct evidence, and they did not want to risk a not guilty verdict that would prevent them from charging him again in the future. The dismissal was a devastating blow to Marcia's family, who had hoped for closure after nearly a decade of uncertainty. Donnie, meanwhile, maintained his innocence and returned to his life in Georgia, where he now spends time with his grandchildren and new partner. Marcia's disappearance has sparked numerous theories. Some believe she was murdered by Donnie, while others speculate that she may have left voluntarily due to depression or marital problems. Marcia had been struggling with menopause and severe depression in the months leading up to her disappearance, and her writing group received an email from her in May 2009 stating that she would be missing for some time. However, friends and family find it hard to believe that Marcia would abandon her life, her dogs, and her home without a word. Despite the lack of a body, a civil court has ruled that Marcia is deceased. Her case remains open, and her name is listed on the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Investigators continue to search for answers, hoping that new evidence or a tip from the public will finally solve the mystery of what happened to Marcia Brantley. Marcia's family and friends have not given up hope. They remember her as a kind, loving, and talented woman who deserved better than to vanish without a trace. Her aunt, Medra, and cousin, Jenna, have been vocal advocates for justice, pushing investigators to keep the case alive. They believe that Donnie Brantley knows more than he has revealed and hope that one day the truth will come alight. For now, Marcia Brantley's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, a tragic reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring quest for justice. Her story continues to haunt the community of Cleveland, Tennessee, and serves as a call to action for anyone with information to come forward. Until then, Marcia's family and friends will keep her memory alive, holding on to the hope that one day they will find the answers they so desperately seek. If you have any information about Marcia Brantley's disappearance, please contact the Bradley County Sheriff's Office at 423-728-7336. On July 29, 2012, Latrice Armstead, a 38-year-old mother of three, vanished without a trace in Memphis, Tennessee. She was last seen in the 4200 block of Spring Leaf Lane, reportedly in the presence of her estranged husband, Tony Bledsoe. The couple had been separated and were in the process of finalizing their divorce. Their relationship had been marred by domestic violence, and Latrice had taken steps to leave Tony permanently. Latrice had endured years of abuse. A particularly violent incident occurred during a family vacation to New Orleans, where Tony assaulted her so severely that he broke her jaw. After that attack, Latrice fled to St. Louis, Missouri, with her three sons to stay with her sister, Brenda. She began to rebuild her life, seeking comfort in family and planning for a brighter future. She encouraged Brenda to pursue nursing school and was preparing to re-enroll in her own nursing studies. For the first time in years, she felt free and safe. Her divorce was set to be finalized in early August 2012, and Latrice returned to Memphis to collect the rest of her belongings. She also intended to let her oldest son spend time with a friend before their official move. On the day she disappeared, Latrice had dropped her son off for a sleepover but remained in Memphis to wait for him. Witnesses saw her getting into a car with Tony later that day. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. Concerned when she did not check in, Brenda quickly contacted family members and then filed a missing persons report. Shortly afterward, authorities found Latrice's black Acura abandoned and on fire in a rural part of Kossuth, Mississippi, about 50 miles outside Memphis and her childhood hometown. This discovery heightened fears that something terrible had happened to her. Tony Bledsoe, who had a documented history of domestic violence, became the primary person of interest in Latrice's disappearance. A police affidavit confirmed that they were seen together on the day she went missing. At the time of her disappearance, Latrice had an active order of protection against Tony due to past assaults. When police sought to question him, he initially evaded them. When they finally brought him in for questioning, he was uncooperative and provided no useful information regarding Latrice's whereabouts. Despite strong suspicions against Tony, no charges were ever filed against him in connection to Latrice's disappearance. However, in the years following, he was arrested for domestic violence against another woman, further demonstrating a pattern of abusive behavior. Brenda, who had taken custody of Latrice's 3 children, worked tirelessly to keep her sister's case in the public eye. She believed that Latrice would never willingly abandon her sons, reinforcing the theory that foul play was involved. She described Latrice as a devoted mother who would check in constantly, even while entrusting her children to loved ones. As of 2023, Latrice Armstead remains missing. Her sons, now grown, continue to be raised by Brenda, who has never given up hope for answers. Though authorities suspect that Latrice met with foul play, her case remains unsolved and no arrests have been made. Anyone with information regarding the disappearance of Latrice Armstead is urged to come forward. Her family, especially her children, deserves to know the truth about what happened to her. Brenda continues her fight for justice, refusing to let her sister's case be forgotten. Henry Ackerman lived alone with his dog and 3 cats in Baltimore, Maryland, in 1998. He worked as a child psychologist for the city school system. A dedicated professional, he was well regarded by his colleagues and the families he assisted. Ackerman had suffered a personal tragedy in 1994 when his wife died of cancer while they were living in Memphis, Tennessee. Following her death, he sought a fresh start, first moving to Oregon before ultimately settling in Maryland. Ackerman was preparing for another major transition in his life in the summer of 1998. He had accepted a job in Alaska and was planning to relocate there. His plans were well thought out. He had already secured a position with a school and intended to live in a camper. His friends and neighbors were aware of his upcoming move, and he had arranged for a temporary caretaker for his pets while he was away, making preparations. On June 18, 1998, Ackerman left Baltimore for Memphis to purchase a used pickup truck, which he planned to drive back to Maryland before heading to Alaska. He flew into Memphis with the intention of buying a red and white striped 1995 GMC pickup. The transaction was completed, and he took possession of the vehicle. However, there was some remaining paperwork to be finalized at the dealership, and Ackerman was scheduled to return the next day to complete the process. He never showed up. In addition to his plans with the dealership, Ackerman was supposed to retrieve a camper he'd purchased for his move to Alaska. That, too, was left unclaimed. When he failed to return home as scheduled, his friends and neighbors became increasingly concerned. His beloved pets remained in his Baltimore home, awaiting his return, but he never came back. Authorities traced Ackerman's movements in Memphis and discovered that he had planned to meet up with an acquaintance named Dale V. Marty's, a local gun dealer. Marty's and Ackerman had a shared interest in firearms, and they had met in the past for years. Ackerman's disappearance remained a mystery. Investigators pursued various leads, but his whereabouts remained unknown. It wasn't until 2001, when Marty's was arrested for the murder of another man, Mickey Wright, that his potential involvement in Ackerman's case came under serious scrutiny. In a gruesome turn of events, Marty's had burned Wright's remains in a 55-gallon drum, leaving behind little evidence of his crime. Marty's initially pleaded no contest to second-degree murder in state court in 2007 and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, federal prosecutors later pursued additional charges. In March 2011, Marty's pleaded guilty in federal court and was sentenced to life in prison in July of that year. It was only during these later proceedings that law enforcement officials uncovered Marty's role in Ackerman's disappearance. Before his sentencing hearing, Marty's admitted to murdering Ackerman following an argument over a debt. He confessed to killing him before disposing of the body in the same manner he would later use for right. Due to the method of disposal, authorities concluded that Ackerman's remains would never be recovered, effectively closing the case despite the absence of physical evidence. Ackerman was an accomplished professional with a distinguished academic background. He earned a bachelor's degree in child development from St. John Fisher College in New York, a master's degree in public service from Western Kentucky University, and a Ph.D. in education from the University of Memphis. He was licensed as a psychological examiner in Tennessee and had dedicated his life to working with children and families in need. With Marty's now serving a life sentence in federal prison, where parole is not an option, law enforcement considers the case closed. While Ackerman's body was never found, the confession from his killer confirmed his fate. His disappearance, once a troubling mystery, ultimately found resolution through the justice system, albeit years after the crime had been committed. The case of Sheila Bradford is one steeped in mystery, tragedy, and unanswered questions. Her disappearance remains unsolved decades later, raising speculation that she may have been silenced for knowing too much about a brutal double homicide. Despite this, no one has ever been charged in her case, and the trail has grown cold. Sheila Bradford was a 33-year-old mother of 3 living in Camden, Tennessee, when she vanished without a trace on September 22, 1992. A divorced woman, she had been married to Jackie Bradford for 14 years and had 5 siblings, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. At the time of her disappearance, Sheila had been in a relationship with J.C. Bruce, a man with a violent past and known criminal connections. Bruce had a long rap sheet that included attempted murder, rape, domestic violence, and various other charges. Unfortunately, Sheila became another victim of his abuse, living in constant fear for her life. Her case is inextricably linked to the 1991 murders of Danny Vine and Della Thornton, a case that had already been under investigation for over a year when Sheila went missing. Vine was a known mussel shell collector, and his murder was orchestrated by the Bruce brothers, Gary, Jerry, and Robert Bruce, who killed him to steal his valuable mussel shells and sell them for profit. Eventually, all 3 brothers were caught and convicted of the crime, receiving life sentences without parole. J.C. Bruce, their 4th brother, was never charged in connection with the murders, though he remained a person of interest. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Sheila had information regarding the double homicide that she believed could help authorities. On September 21, 1992, she reached out to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and arranged a meeting at the Country and Western Steakhouse restaurant in Camden. Sheila and her 15-year-old daughter, Christy, arrived at the meeting with TBI agents, where Sheila expressed her fear of J.C. Bruce and pleaded for protection. However, investigators dismissed her concerns, stating that the information she provided about the murders was not substantial enough to warrant police protection. Then, in an event that could not have been a mere coincidence, an explosion erupted outside the restaurant during their meeting. A nearby building had been intentionally set on fire, and it later became evident that this was an act of arson. Many now believe the explosion was meant to serve as a warning to Sheila, to scare her into silence. Alarmed by the explosion and frustrated with law enforcement's lack of action, Sheila and Christy left the meeting. Sheila, feeling abandoned and unprotected, went into hiding that night. The following day, on September 22nd, Sheila returned to her home to retrieve some clothes and tend to some laundry. That was the last time anyone ever saw her. Her car was later found with the keys still in the ignition, and her laundry remained unfinished inside her house. Investigators noted that there was no sign of forced entry or a struggle, but it remains unclear if they thoroughly processed her home as a crime scene. Reports indicate that authorities initially refused to acknowledge her disappearance as foul play, insisting that she had simply gone into hiding due to fear of her abusive boyfriend. Because of this, no official search was conducted for Sheila in the days and weeks following her disappearance. Her family, particularly her daughter Christy, was left with more questions than answers. Christy, who had witnessed her mother's growing terror and her desperate plea for protection, has long believed that the police did not do enough to take Sheila's case seriously. Over the years, Christy has dedicated herself to changing the way missing persons cases are handled. She now works in law enforcement in Tennessee, striving to ensure that cases like her mother's are treated with urgency and care. In the years following Sheila's disappearance, suspicions around J.C. Bruce continued to grow. While he was never charged in connection to the Vine and Thornton murders, his criminal record only expanded. In 1993, he pled guilty to weapons charges and was sentenced to 46 months in prison. In 2000, he was convicted of an assault charge, and in 2015, he was arrested for poaching paddlefish. Many believe that J.C. Bruce, or one of his brothers, was responsible for Sheila's disappearance, either as a means to silence her permanently or to prevent her from testifying against them. It wasn't until decades later, in 2020, that Tennessee Governor Bill Lee announced a $10,000 reward for information leading to the discovery of Sheila or the capture of her killer. Private donors later increased the reward to $20,000, yet no substantial leads have come forward. Despite the renewed interest in her case, no arrests have been made, and Sheila's whereabouts remain unknown. Investigators now officially recognize Sheila Bradford's case as a homicide, though they have little evidence to support their theories. The failure to treat her disappearance as a crime from the beginning meant that crucial evidence was lost, witnesses disappeared, and the passage of time only further obscured the truth. Authorities believe that Sheila was murdered to keep her silent, but by whom and where her remains might be hidden remains a haunting mystery. To this day, Sheila's Social Security number has never been used, her bank accounts remain untouched, and there has never been a confirmed sighting of her. It is widely believed that someone within the Bruce family or their circle of criminal associates holds the key to solving her disappearance. The Bruce brothers, known for their arrogance and braggadocio about their crimes, may have let slip details about Sheila's fate to someone. If that person were to come forward, justice could finally be served for Sheila and her grieving family. If you or anyone you know has information regarding the disappearance and presumed murder of Sheila Bradford, please contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at 1-800-TBI-FIND. Tips can be submitted anonymously, and any detail, no matter how small, could be the key to bringing closure to this decades-old mystery. On the evening of January 15, 1991, 31-year-old Karen Beard was last seen dropping off her two daughters at the home of her former in-laws in Kingston, Tennessee. It was a routine exchange, one she had done before, but this time, she never returned. Karen was supposed to work the next morning at the Shoney's restaurant in Lenoir City, Tennessee, but she never arrived. It was the first indication that something was terribly wrong. The first puzzling clue in her disappearance emerged the next day. A call was made to Collier Wrecker Service requesting a tow for Karen's vehicle. The woman on the line identified herself as Karen and provided directions to the car's location. However, when the employee who took the call later listened to a recording of Karen's voice, he was adamant that the caller had not been her. Investigators were left questioning whether the real Karen had placed the call or if someone else was trying to cover their tracks. Karen's lawyer was the one who officially reported her missing on January 23rd, after she failed to attend an important legal appointment. When police and the attorney went to her apartment in Harriman, Tennessee, they found no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Her belongings, purse, wallet, and car keys were still inside. Her car, however, was found near the Center Ferry Bridge at the Clinch River, less than a mile from her former in-law's home. It had been abandoned there after the mysterious tow truck call. This discovery raised further suspicions that her disappearance was not voluntary. Karen's personal life at the time was complex and fraught with tension. She was in the midst of a bitter custody battle with her ex-husband, Reese Beard, over their 2 daughters. The couple had originally separated in California in 1985, but after Karen failed to appear at a 1987 custody hearing, Reese was awarded custody of the children by default. Desperate to regain custody, Karen had moved to Tennessee to fight for her parental rights. The battle had become acrimonious, with allegations of alcoholism, drug use, and infidelity leveled by both parties. Karen's sister would later state that Karen had been deeply afraid of Reese, so much so that she had explicitly asked her to take care of her daughters should anything happen to her. While Karen had a history of drug addiction, particularly to methamphetamine and cocaine, her family insisted she had gotten clean to be a better mother. In 1985, she had undergone treatment for her addiction in California. Despite her efforts to rebuild her life, those close to her feared that her past struggles and her ongoing conflict with Reese had placed her in danger. At the time of her disappearance, Karen was pregnant, and her sister alleged that Reese was the father of the unborn child. Reese, however, denied the claim. Karen's former mother-in-law painted a picture of her as unstable, even going so far as to state that Karen had disappeared voluntarily before, once for nearly a year. Investigators, however, believed that something far more sinister had happened this time. Law enforcement came to suspect that Karen had been lured to a house in Kingston, Tennessee, where she was murdered and her body disposed of. Suspicion fell on several of Reese's associates, who were known to have criminal ties. Years after Karen's disappearance, a potential breakthrough in the case arose when one of these individuals, suffering from terminal cancer, requested to speak with police. But by the time investigators reached him at the hospital, he had died, taking whatever secrets he held with him. Despite compelling evidence suggesting foul play, no arrests have ever been made in connection to Karen Beard's disappearance. More than 3 decades have passed, and her body has never been found. Her daughters grew up without their mother, left with lingering questions about what happened to her that night in January 1991. To this day, Karen Beard's case remains open and unsolved. The disappearance of Christina Branham and Christopher Middendorf in 2006 remains one of Tennessee's most haunting mysteries. Young, in love, and eager to start a life together, the couple vanished without a trace on a hot summer day in July. Over the years, theories have circulated, some pointing to a known criminal, others hinting at a voluntary disappearance, but no concrete answers have ever emerged. Families have waited in agony for nearly 2 decades, hoping for a resolution that has yet to come. Christina Branham was only 17 years old in 2006, a happy and spirited teenager with dreams for the future. She had plans to join the U.S. Army after finishing high school, a step she hoped would provide stability and adventure. She was engaged to Christopher Middendorf, a 21-year-old who shared her hopes of building a life together. The two had been dating for about a year before they decided to move in together. At the time of their disappearance, they were living with Christopher's mother, Cheryl Flatt, in Savannah, Tennessee. Savannah is a small town of about 7,000 people, situated near the Tennessee River, about 2 hours east of Memphis. Their daily life seemed typical for young adults, spending time with family, making plans, and enjoying each other's company. Nothing in their behavior suggested that they were planning to disappear voluntarily. On July 27, 2006, Christina and Christopher set out for a shopping trip. What exactly they purchased is unknown, but when Cheryl returned home later that day, she found their shopping bags placed neatly on their bed. However, the couple was nowhere to be found. Initially, Cheryl assumed they had gone out again, perhaps to visit friends or run errands. But as the hours passed and they didn't return, she grew concerned. A call from Christopher's father heightened her anxiety. He reported that the couple had planned to visit him that afternoon, but never showed up. Calls to their cell phones went unanswered. By the following day, July 28, 2006, their families reported them missing to the Hardin County Sheriff's Department. 4 days later, on July 31st. A break in the case came when their dark green 1994 Geo Prism was found abandoned in Lawrence County, Tennessee, about 50 miles from Savannah. The car was parked near a pond in a rural area outside of Lawrenceburg. The vehicle was unlocked, and a chilling discovery awaited investigators inside. One of the couple's cell phones, along with other personal belongings, had been left behind. This suggested that whatever had happened to them wasn't planned. They had no reason to leave behind their means of communication. A witness claimed to have seen a young couple exit the car and get into another vehicle, a white car driven by an unknown individual. Unfortunately, the witness could provide little additional information. Who was in the white car? Were they friends of the missing couple, or was someone else entirely? Reports vary regarding whether the pond near the abandoned car was ever searched. Some accounts claim it was thoroughly examined, while others suggest it was overlooked. Regardless, authorities had no clear leads on where Christina and Christopher might have gone after leaving their car behind. As authorities struggled to find answers, Cheryl Flatt discovered something unsettling. While searching Christopher's room for clues, she came across a lockbox containing items belonging to a man named George Edward Boggess. Boggess, also known as Eddie or Bad Egg, had an extensive criminal record, including arrests for drug and theft-related charges. Cheryl began to wonder if her son and his fiancée had stolen from Boggess, or worse, crossed him in a way that led to their disappearance. Authorities took this lead seriously, but before they could press Boggess for answers, tragedy struck. In 2010, he was shot and killed by his wife, Shannon Boggess, during a domestic altercation. Shannon was charged with first-degree murder, but later acquitted after claiming self-defense. Did Boggess take the secret of Christina and Christopher's fate to his grave? Some, including his daughter, insist he had nothing to do with their disappearance. Others, including Cheryl Flatt, aren't so sure. With little concrete evidence, theories about the couple's disappearance have varied widely. Some believe they may have willingly run away together, possibly fearing trouble with the law. However, those who knew them insist this was completely out of character. Others suggest they may have been victims of foul play, perhaps at the hands of Boggess or someone else they encountered that day. If they did get into a white car, as the witness suggested, who was the driver? Did they trust this person, or were they forced into the vehicle? The location of their abandoned car also raises questions. Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, where the car was found, is a rural area with a population of about 11,000. The surrounding landscape consists of forests, waterways, and wildlife areas, including Davy Crockett State Park and a Laurel Hill Wildlife Management Area. If foul play was involved, the remoteness of this location could have provided an opportunity for someone to make them disappear without a trace. Adding to the tragedy, Christina's family suffered another devastating loss just 2 years later. Her brother was shot and killed by his employer in 2008, compounding the pain of an already grieving family. In the years since their disappearance, there have been reported sightings of Christina and Christopher in Tennessee, Georgia, and even as far as Oklahoma. However, none have been confirmed. Their families have spent nearly 2 decades searching for answers, but law enforcement has little new evidence to work with. Today, both Christina and Christopher remain classified as missing persons, and their case remains open with the Hardin County Sheriff's Office and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. If still alive, Christopher Mittendorf would be 40 years old, and Christina Branham would be 36. Christopher was last seen wearing a t-shirt, blue jeans, white sneakers, and a white baseball cap. He has a burn scar between his thumb and forefinger. He stood 5 feet 5 inches and weighed about 120 pounds in 2006. Christina had brown hair and brown eyes and stood 5 feet 2 inches and weighed about 150 pounds. She has a tattoo of a rose on her right hip. Anyone with information about their case is urged to contact the Hardin County Sheriff's Office at 731-925-3377 or the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. As time passes, the mystery of what happened to Christina Branham and Christopher Middendorf only deepens. Did they fall victim to a dangerous criminal? Did they simply choose to leave everything behind? Or is there someone out there who still knows the truth but has yet to come forward. For their families, the wait continues. On May 23, 2014, Nicole Burgess, a 36-year-old mother from Nashville, Tennessee, sent a text message to a friend. It was an ordinary message, giving no indication that it would be the last time anyone would hear from her. Nicole had planned to take a trip to Sparta, Tennessee, the following day, but when she failed to show up, friends grew concerned. They went to check on her at her home in the 900 block of Oakvale Drive, only to find an eerie and unsettling scene. Her car remained in the driveway, her purse still inside it. The house, which was usually tidy and organized, was in complete disarray. Most concerning of all, her two beloved dogs were loose inside, left without food or water, and had soiled the floors multiple times. Something was very wrong. Nicole was an animal lover, a devoted mother, and someone who kept a neat home. The idea that she would simply vanish without making arrangements for her son or pets was unfathomable to those who knew her. Alarmed, her friends contacted the authorities, and an investigation into her disappearance was launched. As investigators began piecing together the events surrounding Nicole's disappearance, they spoke with neighbors. One neighbor reported seeing an unfamiliar vehicle in Nicole's driveway over the weekend of May 24th. Another, who was a close friend, witnessed something even more disturbing. In the early hours of that morning, they saw two individuals carrying something heavy out of the house through the back door. One of them was instantly recognizable, Caleb J. Cannon, the father of Nicole's 10-year-old son. Cannon and Burgess had been in an ongoing dispute regarding custody of their child. The two had never been married, but they shared a volatile relationship that had long been fraught with tension. According to Burgess's final text messages, she and Cannon had been arguing prior to her disappearance. When questioned, Cannon provided no useful information regarding Nicole's whereabouts. He denied any involvement and insisted he had no idea what had happened to her. But investigators were not convinced. As the investigation progressed, more disturbing evidence began to emerge. Nicole's son confided in a friend that he might never see his mother again because, in his words, she was probably dead, and he believed his father had killed her. The forensic investigation yielded even more damning clues. Cadaver-sniffing dogs detected the scent of human remains in Nicole's home as well as in the trunk of Cannon's car. A search of her residence turned up empty bottles of cleaning fluid, brass knuckles, and blood-stained bedding. Investigators theorized that Nicole had been murdered inside her home, her body placed in Cannon's trunk, and later disposed of in an unknown location. Despite an extensive search, her body was never recovered. In October 2015, over a year after Nicole's disappearance, authorities felt they had gathered enough evidence to charge Caleb Cannon with her murder. The case moved forward, and Cannon was arrested. He maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. His trial began in May 2017. The most compelling testimony came from his own son, who bravely took the stand to testify against his father. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Caleb Cannon was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although Caleb Cannon was convicted of Nicole Burgess's murder, the case remains, in some ways, unresolved. Her body has never been found, leaving her loved ones without a true sense of closure. The conviction provided justice, but it did not answer the lingering questions about where she was taken or what exactly happened in the final moments of her life. Authorities continue to urge anyone with information to come forward in the hopes of one day recovering Nicole's remains. Until then, her family and friends must live with the painful reality that, while they know who took her life, they do not know where she rests. Anyone with information about the location of Nicole Burgess's remains is urged to contact the Nashville Police Department or the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.